Hi everyone, welcome to episode 70 of the podcast, and this is your host Tomobi. Welcome to today's episode, and I hope we all enjoyed last week's episode. We had the first guest for the episode last week. If you haven't listened, you can listen to it. She spoke about the guided trade initiative scheme that was launched in Nigeria. So if you're a Nigerian exporter and business owner, please listen to that episode. For today, I'm going to discuss about this recent news about African trade ministers, the ban on trade in second-hand clothes within the AfCFTA. So I'm sure a lot of us must have seen that, and some people are probably wondering what exactly is going on. What does that really mean? So let's go right into today's episode. So recently, the African trade ministers adopted the rules of origin on textile and apparel industry. For those that are not aware, I've done some episodes on rules of origin. You want to listen to that. Basically, there are rules that determine if a product that is made or manufactured or worked within the AfCFTA qualifies for preferential treatment. That is, if a product that is traded within the AfCFTA qualifies for preferential treatment, and there are two criteria that the product must have been only obtained within the AfCFTA country, or if it's not only obtained or produced within the state parties of the AfCFTA, then it must have been sufficiently worked upon. And so there are set down criteria to determine sufficiently worked upon products. So that's basically what it is. So last week, the African trade ministers adopted the rules of origin concerning the textile and the apparel industry, and that prevents trade in second-hand clothes within the AfCFTA. So what does that really mean? I'm going to be sharing some information that was released by the Director of Institutional Matters and Programs Coordination at AfCFTA, Prudence Shibaizi. He spoke with the News Times, and it was interviewed, and he spoke about what it means, what does the ban seeks to address. So before I go into that, let me just share some data that I have here. So an observation is that Africa accounts for nearly a third of global imports of second-hand clothing. That is estimated at $5 billion. It was estimated at $5 billion in 2019, and that about 80% of Africa's population wears second-hand clothes, mainly imported from the US, Europe, India, and Pakistan. So that's it. So let's go to what the ban on importation of second-hand clothes means, based on So I highlight what Prudence, that's the Director of Institutional Matters and Programs Coordination at AfCFTA, has said. So the first one is the ban takes immediate effect. So that means because the rules of origin under the AfCFTA, they're already in force. So whatever is agreed upon takes immediate effect. So because the decision of the African trade ministers obviously takes immediate effect, right? So there are no preferential treatments for second-hand clothes. And so if you are going to be exporting them, or bringing them into Africa, then you have to pay duties. It doesn't qualify for preferential treatment. The second-hand clothes duties have to be paid on it. The next one. So there are also going to be experts that will monitor the process. That means there are experts that will differentiate between made in Africa used clothes and from new ones. So the experts will monitor the production process and the trading process. So if a product is made in an African country and has been used, a used product from an African country, if you want to export it to another African country, that will not be allowed. So because that's going to constitute dumping into another African country, so that's not allowed. Then the third one is value addition to the made in Africa. So it must mean basically to make a level of value addition for made in Africa product. So let's say you're importing a textile or clothes from outside Africa, completely outside the continent, then you now bring it to Africa. just to add buttons to it. That's not going to qualify as made in Africa. Remember, I said earlier that the rules of origin, there are 2 criteria. It must have been wholly obtained, or it must have been sufficiently worked upon. So there are criteria to determine sufficiently worked upon products. So adding button to an outfit does not qualify as sufficiently worked upon. So there has to be a level of value addition for the product to be able to be traded under the AfCFTA. So of course, what it means that it doesn't necessarily need everything, all the materials, the products, all from Africa, but you can bring in raw materials to produce a new product that will qualify under the rules of origin, but it must qualify under the sufficiently worked upon criteria. And of course, like I stated earlier, the ban is basically to promote or boost our African trade textile industry. So of course, this will bring opportunity for us to also manufacture our own locally made African clothing. So, and our fashion players within the fashion industry in Africa, they have the appropriate skills to meet the needs of Africans in taste and fashion. That is what he has said. And finally, he said that this speaks volume on need for quality products. So this means that quality is very important in the textile industry, and if second-hand clothing importation is discouraged, the designers within Africa, they'll find it easier to sell at a lower price in Africa and also benefit from economies of scale. So that is what he has said in his interview with New Times. So, and this is where we are stopping for today's episode. And as usual, the podcast is for educational purposes only. If you want to discuss more, if you need expert advice, please reach out to me or to any trade experts around you. And until next week, I say to you, bye-bye.